Come marching in when the saints go marching in that number when the saints go marching in. Now once I had a good friend, but he has gone before. I know that I will meet her on that far and distant shore.
Business, if you dig down a bit, are actually more honest about what they're doing than the politicians who say that we have to support them. So you would never have a British Secretary for Defence saying we have nuclear weapons which we're prepared to use if necessary to strike with lethality, with precise, devastating lethality. You know, his PR people would run a mile from that sort of language. But this tells you exactly what it's about. So we have the United States, and we have, of course, Britain, and we have Russia, and we have France, and none of whom have signed up to a none of them have pledged not to use nuclear weapons first. All of whom have said that under certain conditions they might use nuclear weapons against non-nuclear targets. I've omitted China, and I may not. Tom has written about this. China does have a no first use policy, but whether when it comes to the point, particularly with the current Chinese leadership, is another matter. So these are the 5 nuclear powers who, at the beginning of last year, if you may remember, signed a joint statement saying that nuclear war could never be won and must be avoided at all costs. And yet, and this is the abiding paradox of nuclear deterrence, which has been an abiding paradox for 70, 75 years, you say that the weapons must never be used, but you also say that you are prepared to use them. And that is a paradox to which there is no answer.
The military have their own secure satellites, but they also rely heavily on commercial satellite providers for airtime and services. So that includes command and control, military communications, and also positioning and targeting. And this has significant consequences. First, what we are seeing is a new space race as governments and corporations seek to secure their position as space becomes more crowded and more contested. And certainly our government in this country make no attempt to disguise this. The Minister of Defence Procurement at the time in 2019 told the 2019 UK Space Conference that, this is another quote, "Competition in space is fierce, and the challenge of protecting our orbiting systems needs strategic thinking to reduce threat impact. That's why we and our close allies have determined it to be a war-fighting domain." So space is a war-fighting domain now. Now, the second consequence, which perhaps is even more worrying, is that the loss of a key satellite at a time of international crisis, either a military satellite or a dual-use one, which might be used, say, for early warning, perhaps, of a missile attack. If there was a problem with that satellite, perhaps as a result of a pure accident, like a strike by space debris or a meteorite, or possibly more sinisterly, through something deliberate like a cyber attack, then that could have severe consequences, and it could act as a trigger resulting in a military exchange.
Stand up, people, make a choice, create a world without nuclear threat. All together we are strong, sign the nuclear ban. Stand up, people, make a choice, create a world without nuclear threat. All together we are strong, sign the nuclear ban.
And the situation could not be more dangerous, as we know. The bulletin of the atomic scientists set their clock, their doomsday clock, to 90 seconds to midnight. 90 seconds to midnight, where midnight represents the risk and possibility of complete human annihilation, an existential risk. This is closer than the hands have ever been to midnight. Since 1945, through the Cuban Missile Crisis, through the events of the 1980s, it is closer now than it has ever been. And although nuclear tensions and nuclear risks are a huge driver of this dangerous situation, Peter and John were right to point out that the risk of the unfolding climate catastrophe we face, pandemics, emerging technologies are all contributing to this perilous situation. And we need to take their message seriously.
When the saints go marching in, wanna be there in that number. When the saints go marching in,